So now we're going to move to a video which talks about how the planning might have been done. I am not saying that this was the only way to do the planning. I'm not even saying that this was necessarily the best way to do the planning, but I'm trying to give you an example of how some of the planning might have been done. And to start with, we'll look at it from mill to producer's perspective. And I'm not going to try to cover absolutely everything because of time limits here. But step 2, as to goals, okay, there were essential goals: not to pay more than $900,000 of compensation as valued by mill, get the star that she needed, and keep final cut. Desirable goals included paying the lowest compensation possible, trading off salary for points if that was favorable, based on an adjusted gross, doing a director's cut DVD if certain conditions were met, and preferably keeping casting control beyond the star. On issues, you had issues of salary points, partly based, which would fall under compensation, partly basing compensation on performing on time and on budget, an issue of who would star, an issue of final cut control and a subsidiary of that director's cut DVD, an issue of casting control, possible issues of other Smith demands. Now, I talked earlier about the importance of trying to define a negotiation. I think a possible desirable definition for mill here for the overall negotiation might have been something along these lines. How do we get this done to make an important movie, to make a movie that we both believe in, and to heighten awareness of the environmental crisis that we're all in, but which is not rate to make a lot of money? In other words, Ms. Mill wants to do this movie because she believes in the message, she believes it's brilliant satire, but she also can't plan to lose millions of dollars. Now, without directly saying it, the subtext of that message was supposed to be, in order to help with later rationales for specific positions, so I can't afford to pay you too much, and points probably make sense to share the risk-reward, and we need a star to sell the movie, not Mr. Smith starring, and I need to keep final cut, or Ms. Mill needs to keep final cut, because this is a risky venture for her, and she's doing it because she believes in the message, not because she believes in the blockbuster potential for it. And hopefully that's going to set things up for her later on in the negotiation. Steps 4 and 5, strengths and weaknesses, fairly obvious. Mill has the money, Smith has the script, sort of corresponding strengths and weaknesses, sort of a mutual strength and weakness. They both want to get this movie made, and the market, as I told you, the market was the range that I gave you in the information. Step 6, Mill might have estimated that Smith, since he thinks he's a genius, would ask for something over the market level of $1.1 million once he accepted that he could not star, even though he would initially ask to star. That he would ask for final cut, that he would ask for other non-economic concessions or perks, that he might well ask for points, although he might also introduce those later on in the negotiation. And that an estimate of his bottom line might have been that he would take something near the market low, maybe $450,000, including a $50,000 bonus for coming in on time and a $50,000 bonus for coming in on budget. I'm not saying that those were the exact numbers by any means, but it is an example of being specific and of why those might have been reasonable estimates to make. Step 7 on win-win. Let Smith pick between the from the list of stars, given that he can't star. The director's cut DVD if the conditions are met. And a possibly perceived win-win based upon points. Step 8, opening. I probably would have laid down a precondition of, we need to have a real star, and here's who Mr. Smith gets to pick from. I might have offered $300,000 with a $50,000 bonus each for coming in on time and on budget. Step 10, strategy and tactics. Actual or apparent problem solving and high realistic expectations, small systematic concessions. I think I would have wanted to make the first offer in this particular negotiation. That doesn't mean that that was the only right answer about that. And I would have, as I said, I think, put down a precondition about starring. Concessions and trade-offs, I would have tried to work in points, trading off if I could for maybe $125,000, which was more than Mill's real value, as it happens less than what I said that Smith's real value was. I don't know that I would have been able to guess that myself. And possibly agreeing to non-economic demands, depending on what they were, and then gradually increasing. Could have been $450,000 plus a director's cut, then $550, then $650. At some point, I would have started to make my concessions smaller, most likely. Maybe only going to $7 from $650 if I had to do that. Still well below my bottom line, and not being in, and depending on how the negotiation played out, but for planning purposes, not being in a rush to get up by any means, to get up to close to the maximum that I could pay. And then step 12 on agenda, I would have wanted to start out by talking to build up some rapport, to try to get my overall definition into place, to hear what Smith's negotiator had to say. And I would not have introduced anything about final cut or casting, because if that doesn't come up, I think the default stays with my client Mill. So why do I want to bring it up and act as if it's an appropriate topic for negotiation? I'd wait and let Smith do it. So that's sort of an overview of how I might have planned for Mill. How I might have planned for Smith. Obviously, essential goals of got to use his script. Smith has to direct. His minimum amount of money, desirable goals, maximizing his compensation, trading off favorably points for salary if possible, his wanting to star, his wanting a final cut, or alternatively, director's cut DVD, casting control, and his being prominently shown in the credits. From those goals would follow the issues, although anticipating, as Mill might have done, that Smith's directing and use of the script were really going to be non-issues. Even though they were goals, they weren't in any way going to be a matter of dispute. Smith's message, definition of the negotiation, might have been something like, I'm offering you an opportunity for financially, politically, and artistically successful partnership. Again, creating a subtext to later provide rationales for specific positions about why he should be paid more and why all of his demands should be met. Steps 4 and 5 on strengths and weaknesses in the market should have been the same for Mill and Smith. Really no differences there. Step 6, estimating Mill's opening position, might have thought that she would come in around the market low without starring, and that her bottom line might have been a little bit under the market high. So it might have been, if we could work points into this, even maybe something as much as $250,000 plus 5 points of adjusted gross if I was able, as Smith's negotiator, to guess that it was going to have to be an adjusted gross. Without starring, but with final cut, a veto on the star if Smith wasn't starring, input but not control of the rest of the casting, and prominently having Smith's name displayed in the credits. So I'm not saying that I would have guessed, Mill's exact bottom line, but I would have tried to specifically make my best estimate. Step 7, kind of similar between the two parties because a win-win is a win-win. An opening position, I might, for Smith, have had an opening position of $700,000 plus 5 points of the adjusted gross if I was going to introduce that right away. First, I would have wanted to find out whether it had to be adjusted gross, or if it wasn't, I would have changed that number of points to reflect straight gross rather than adjusted gross, with starring, with final cut approval, with cast control, and with prominent display in the credits. I think in this one I would have been interested in making the first offer from either side, but that's a judgment call. If you disagree with that, there's nothing wrong with your disagreeing with that. Concessions and trade-offs, again, I would have tried for Smith to trade favorably for salary, giving up less salary than I really valued the points at. That would have been what I was going to try to do anyway. And step 12, again, I would have tried to create rapport and work in my definition before I made that first offer. So again, those are examples of how I might have done the planning from either side. And I hope that gives you a chance to compare that and to think about that in comparison to the choices that you made.